All right, everyone. Welcome to the July 12th, Wednesday occurrence of the Ambient Workgroup meeting. So first up on the agenda is follow-up from a couple of weeks ago. We were reviewing the Drive Ambient Mesh 2 beta doc here, the one that Lynn started. And so first of all, once we go through this doc, and the purpose of this exercise that myself, Lynn, Keith, Nathan, and John undertook yesterday is to prioritize the items outlined in this doc so that we have a clear understanding of what must be in the ambient beta MVP, what are the good to haves, and the items are not worth considering for beta. So we are about halfway through this document, and once we're completely through, it will require approving from the TOC members. So one thing we realized that this doc is structured into sub-feature areas. And one thing we realized that in the 1 hour that we had yesterday, it's not possible to go through and go into details feature areas. So instead, what we did is we prioritized the existing items on there, but also nominated community leaders to go and drive each one of these areas in order to get to the the list of actual items that are needed here, and most importantly, make them into issues and have descriptions for each of the issues. So one thing I want to use the first time in this, the first part of this meeting is to go through the doc here and make sure that we have owners for each one of these, that the community owners here are willing to take up this responsibility. So stabilizing the ambient APIs, Keith, you're already on that, so thank you very much. The second part about extending ambient beyond single cluster Kubernetes workloads. So looking through the section, we decide that this is none of these are must-haves for ambient beta, and so we don't have a community lead for this yet. Although each one of these sub-items already have owners next to them. So any questions on this so far? All right, so moving on. Compatibility with at least one major CNI. So the conclusion is we need to support at least one of the CNIs. We need to fully support it. We just don't know which one it is. And for community leader, we nominated Iris for this. Looks like Iris is not here. Oh, first of all, the question is there anyone else, since Iris isn't here today, is there anyone else more qualified than Iris to take on this work? Okay, thank you, Keith. All right, if no comment, then let's move on. Trust and security hardening. This is a big area, especially with the P0 cases of handling the edge cases. So the conclusion we came to is we'll need someone. So the names that we put on here for now, Jackie, she's pretty new. We do need more experienced community members to handle and lead this area. So right now, Keith, you are on this.
Yeah, so I'm just kind of going to be the cat herder trying to find mentorship. Jackie's, pretty capable, but just kind of new to ambient. So if she can get someone to kind of give her the lay of the land, she'll be able to tackle, I think, a couple of these.
right. Any questions or feedback? Okay. So moving on to observability. So actually, John, can you speak to observability? I think you had a lot of comment about this and in terms of who should lead this.
Yeah, so I mean, for this, you discussed like some concrete tasks, like what do we do about baggage? What do we, I don't know, there's something about tracing or Kali or something. But I feel like we never really solved like the overall strategy of like what observability we want to emit. So it's hard to talk about some of the details. Like, you know, we implemented some things, but we never actually really sat down and thought, do we still want reporter source and destination for waypoints? Is that a third reporter? You know, do we want all the same metrics still? How do we deal with the fact that now we have kind of two layers, TCP and HTTP? Do those report metrics? Are they overlapping? All these sorts of problems. So answering those questions is kind of what this task is.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think how we position with versus OpenTelemetry is a big question. I mean, do we continue to support all the 20 different APIs vendors mechanisms, or do we align behind OpenTelemetry and follow their naming convention standards and so forth? Since it's our opportunity to make some API changes.
So I think our conclusion is ideally we need someone on the TLC to think deeply about the strategy and drive this one. Right now, we'll just put John on it. Do we have any other members of the TLC who can take on this work?
I can probably help with requirements and refining. Probably not going to be a ton of use in terms of cat herding PRs.
Is there an option to?
Go ahead, Custom.
No, is there an option to decouple telemetry and ship ambient with telemetry as it is with plan to just move to OpenTelemetry later? I mean, not because telemetry, you know, in gateways, it's what it is. Since we share implementation with the Istio gateways and we want to be compatible. And for Z-tunnel, it's not that critical for the initial release.
I think the problem with that is that it will be very difficult to ship ambience, the topology as beta, and have the metrics not be as beta as the rest of ambient. And so beta telemetry means we support that for going forward, and we lose the ability to make any kind of breaking API changes if we need to. So I think that's the impetus for aligning on the overall strategy for ambient telemetry at this point before we get to ambient beta.
Yeah, my point was that, again, with the community standardizing around OpenTelemetry, one way or another, the future is pretty clear that it's going to be based on OpenTelemetry at some point. So the move to OpenTelemetry, I don't think it can be avoided. What I'm suggesting is to ship with the telemetry we have today, let's call it 1.0, and it can be V1, can be stable, it doesn't have to be beta. But with a clear indication that at a later point, when OpenTelemetry is mature and it has broad adoption, we'll just switch to it and maybe support this one for backward compatibility for a while.
I don't know. It feels ambient changes a lot about Istio's metrics, or I keep using metrics, Istio's telemetry, or potentially changes a lot just because you're in a different topology. I think at the very least, I don't feel comfortable shipping telemetry as is without thinking about some of the edge cases in a beta project that feels like not enough due diligence, in my opinion.
So Keith, you're a little less concerned about the syntax of the telemetry, but more structurally, right? Like what at a high level is being emitted by each of the actors within the network, and how can people interpret that information?
It's essentially, yes. If we do keep the same APIs, then we are acknowledging that moving forward after ambient data, those APIs, and by APIs, I don't mean telemetry, like capital T telemetry API. I mean the actual metric schema log, whatever. We are essentially saying this is what that schema is going to be moving forward. And it doesn't feel like we want to do that unless we sit down and think pretty hard about that decision. Effectively, like if we just move forward, kind of the costume was saying, and just use things as is, that's a decision point, right? We're making the decision to inherit whatever it is we're dealing with now in the Istio sidecar mode, and just kind of inheriting it with ambient, and feels like we don't want to do that.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree. We should not give the impressions that we are going to support that model forever. My point is that the big decision point here is if we adopt the standards or if we invent our own ambient style. That will be the main decision point. If we decide to go the standard, the standard has the fields, has the API, we don't have to do anything. If we decide to invent our own, yeah, I agree with you, then we have to, but that's the main decisions that the TOC need to make. Adopting standard versus inventing our own ambient only telemetry.
Do we need to, what would cause us to invent our own, right? Like right now it's all Prometheus format, right? That's being emitted, or am I missing the context here?
No, not the names, right? What we call the signals.
Oh,
right?
okay.
That's the scheme is really
what signals? So OpenTelemetry recently adopted the schema from Elasticsearch or whatever it's called, OpenSearch, I don't remember. And one of the things they are doing is standardizing on a vocabulary. So all HTTP servers will emit a name named X, and then we'll have labels XYZ. That's really okay.
Yeah, I'd certainly rather track that than invent our own thing. I agree with that. Even if it's in flux, I'd rather track it as an influx thing.
Well, it's probably not really inventing our own thing. It's using our own thing that we made 5 years ago, right?
Right.
I mean, we're not going to create a new thing. We'd either use the old school Istio request total or telemetry. But
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. If we're not going to invent a new thing.
Well, I mean, one of the it is on the board to have a telemetry that is not
the
whole thing. But
right.
It's kind of in the middle, yes. So that's really, I mean, there are three options. Keep the old one for a while, which we need to support for backward compatibility anyway. Move to OpenTelemetry, or create a third one, which is kind of the ambient one. And that's one I don't like.
Agree.
So there's a reason why they're called semantic conventions and not APIs, because they are not schematized in general. They're not really part of the API. So maybe what it means is that we need to adopt the same approach, make them not be API, but something like configuration. So we will not dictate what kind of attribute keys we use. We just say, you can use these values and you can name them however you want. And as the conventions evolve, we'll adapt to the new changes in the convention.
I think their version, they have stable semantics for quite a while. I don't think that they're meant to be, non-APIs.
But they're not actual APIs. If you look at the schemas and protobufs, there's no actual keys that are, the keys that you're talking about. They're just strings.
API doesn't mean necessarily just, a proto. I mean, it can be an API, the schema of the URL in Kubernetes. That's an API.
Well, from the author perspective, the keys are not, they are free form. You can really put anything into the key. And so the
No,
owner,
what I mean, what I mean is they have some keys that are predefined and they're in broad use by Elasticsearch, and they're part of the. I mean, that's really the point. The key names and what should be put inside as a value. That's really what they are trying to define and standardize across vendors.
yeah, I understand, but there is a lot of challenges there. I think they changed them, first of all. Like as recently as May, they changed some of them. And so they are not really final.
So I think there's a convention problem here. While conventions are not APIs, they act like them to a lot of people, even though it's really hard to standardize. Given that if the hotel stuff is in flux custom, it might be a little premature. So we need to go do an assessment of it. Right? How stable is this stuff actually? And maybe we need to go talk to the hotel folks about this. I do agree with Costin. Right, it's going to be very hard to walk away from our existing conventions without having a clear answer to users as to why, right? Because it will disrupt. Like, we know that. Right, we're trying to encourage a lot of users to do upgrades from regular Istio to Ambient, and so we know it's going to be disruptive to that user base.
So I guess the question is beta the right point to tell users you can upgrade your existing service mesh to Ambient? Or is that something that we wait to communicate to stable? At beta, it's good for production use in greenfield cases, and it's stable. You can upgrade your existing service mesh. I don't have a strong opinion there, but we do need to come to a consensus.
Or we carve telemetry out. Right, we say, you know, Ambient is beta for runtime and traffic. You know, the telemetry is alpha.
I'm not sure telemetry is the only problem. If you look down in the doc a little bit, Ambient and sidecar interoperability is listed as a P1 currently.
Yeah, we haven't got there yet.
I'm just saying carving telemetry out isn't going to solve the problem by itself. We would need to carve out.
Yeah, we may have more carve outs. You're right.
I think I think the scope blew up on this a bit, and we are now kind of rehashing a fundamental question about what does beta versus stable mean. I think as far as this observability bullet point, the questions here originally, I think, are about to what degree is Ambient going to break telemetry for sidecars? I don't know that we have a solid answer on that. Like John mentioned some of the reporter stuff, the degree of telemetry you can have for the waypoint versus Z-tonal telemetry. There are a lot of specifics there that I think need to be fleshed out in addition to the general strategy that we've been discussing around hotel and things like that. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, this is, we're kind of responding to Louis saying maybe telemetry is alpha, but Ambient's beta. I've been thinking about this a bit, and I'm a bit worried about approaches like that. Like, I think saying that is fine, but what I would want is kind of opt in to the alpha parts. So if we just say in some doc somewhere, yeah, Ambient's beta, but these 8 features are alpha or experimental, but they're still there and used, and it's kind of implicit. I'm worried that it kind of doesn't matter that we said it was alpha, right? Users will start depending on it. They'll assume it's stable. We've seen time and time again that the fact that some doc says it's alpha is kind of meaningless, right? So we can do that, but I'd like to then say telemetry's off, and you have to opt in and say, you know, alpha telemetry for Ambient enable true or something.
Or we just say these are the limitations of the telemetry system, right? It's not all.
Is there, and it's unstable, and it's just in some doc somewhere that says, hey, don't depend on the telemetry schema. it's largely irrelevant. Like some doc we have on Istio about the stability of something is questionable. It seems much safer if we had a lot of things explicitly opt into it, right?
To opt into, well, the user has to explicitly opt into Ambient.
Yeah, but they're opting into Ambient Beta, and then with that, they could only get the beta features. And if they want to opt into Ambient Alpha, they should have to turn on Ambient Alpha or Ambient X feature Alpha. It's kind of my thinking.
Yeah. But on the other hand, we know we can't, like, there has to be some telemetry with beta. It can't be telemetry off.
Well,
Right.
That's
Yeah,
true.
I mean,
I see the other point as well. So I've gotten very cautious about, I mean, you know, all the problems we've had with mixed stability state when it's not enforced, right? So.
Then you know, the obviously prudent thing to do is to try and be as compatible with the current state as possible, right? Document the limitations of that, right? Release them with the beta state. And then if we want to standardize on OTel, the user has to, either we put a, right, we separate those two things. Right, and if the user wants to adopt OTel, right, we say, or adopt the OTel conventions, right, then it's an explicit opt-in to do that. Right, that would be the safest approach. Austin, what do you think about that?
No, I agree. That's what I was thinking as well. That, you know, we need to support some migration anyway. It doesn't matter if it's now or later. So we need to support the schema, at least a subset of it, to be sufficient for migrations. And at the same time, again, the future, I think, is clear. I don't think we can survive as having our own schema where everyone else is using a different schema. So there will be, maybe we'll have two APIs supported and users will opt for one or the other, but I think we can decouple it. I mean, we can, for the initial version, we can try to be as compatible as possible with the current schema because that's reality, but not necessarily block anything on adopting OpenTelemetry.
Are you suggesting we adopt OpenTelemetry protocol or OpenTelemetry as a whole? Because it's not the same thing.
Semantic convention is the only thing I care because for interoperability, that's what matters. If you have a waypoint gateway from Istio and one from someone else, engineer, Linkerd or someone else, we want the user to be able to see kind of or some vendor. So we want them to have the same views, to be able to craft, to include all the information, to not be kind of distorted view with each of them having different representations, basically. So that's the semantic schema is a part of OpenTelemetry I'm interested in.
But there's also the push-pull semantics differences, and
that's implementation detail should not be visible to user. It's infrastructure. User should not even know about it. It's whatever the infra provides.
Right, but we have a choice, right? I mean, are we carry on with Prometheus standard or we carry on with the hotel protocol? Is it?
My understanding is that they are merging anyway, so and it's not visible to users, so we should not worry too much about it in this discussion.
I agree with Costin. The conventions are probably the more important thing. Right, having an option to support push versus pull doesn't affect most users, right? It affects the admin, right? But pretty much just them. The schema affects everybody downstream of that information, right? Whether it's automation in CI/CD pipelines. If any, heaven forbid, somebody were to build a controller on top of it to do some other form of automation, right? It would have long-lasting consequences.
But a lot of those concerns can be mitigated by a collector, right? And that's the whole point of a collector, is that to adopt existing, telemetry production systems to emit standardized OpenTelemetry.
Right, to do an adaptation, right?
Right. I mean, that's what people do. Existing GKE systems, I think. It's kind of the whole point of a collector is for the administrator to not care about conventions that are used in the applications, instead they label them.
That's the implementation detail. I mean, what matters is what we tell users to use.
So we need to let Francis get through his list. Obviously, there's a deep conversation to be had here. But we should probably put a pin in it just so we get through the top level.
So the list kind of ends here because we only got so far. The observability, well, this is second to last. Integration, we think that Stephen Landau is a great candidate to lead this, but we still need to confirm with Stephen, who is not on the meeting today. So I think one thing that came out of this discussion here is OTel, or observability in general, is a pretty, it's a contentious point. So Louis, can you, as a representative of the TOC, can you help to gather requirements here and set some strategic directions, working with John?
Yeah, I can work on it.
All right, thank you. So the rest of this list, we didn't get through them yesterday, but the intention is once Lynn is back from traveling, she'll work with Nathan, Keith, and John offline to go through the rest of this list. And then we'll review this in 1 week's time. So that's really all I have. Keith, you have the next topic.
Yeah, this might be quick, but I just jinxed myself though, so we'll see. I just wanted to check and see if anybody has a can kind of give me information on the current status of ambient labels and annotations. I saw the doc and the APIs, and I linked to it there in the meeting notes, where we say, no, we're not going to support these annotations, but we do want to support these annotations. Do we have a sense of how much of that work is actually completed? How much is in progress? Let's say we do have some open questions around, for example, pod topology labels or canonical name / revision labels. But yeah, just trying to see kind of what's in flight so I can start making issues or design docs, depending on if they're open questions.
So Keith is asked to see which one of these sections are sufficiently reached consensus, so we can start. So you can start adding issues. Is that the ask?
Yes, it's those last the resource annotations and resource labels. I'm not sure if any of them are done, if any of them, like which ones have consensus, or and which ones are still open questions.
Do you want to just go through them now, or?
I'm sure, happy to. Okay, so first of all, there's another item here to document all the diffs. But the first one will be sidecar CIO. That one pretty obviously feels like it shouldn't belong in ambient. Well, let me clarify. That shouldn't be valid for any ambient redirected pods. So your non-sidecar pods shouldn't be valid. The proxy.istio.config, it says no. I don't know. So I'm thinking about things like, for example, maybe a gateway topology, or other proxy settings, how else would you deploy those to the waypoint without the proxy config today? Like speed mesh config? Because it feels like we'd still need to give users some way to specify settings on the waypoint proxies directly, essentially. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly what it's for.
I mean, there's a bunch of stuff in proxy config. The annotation, not the CRD. Except like some of the gateway stuff. Let me pull up the list. But I feel like that's an open question. So maybe not no for that. Yeah. Connect timeouts, keep alives, tracing, access logging, cross domains. You probably don't know so much. You to edit that, but locality load balancing. So it feels like there might be some things that you want to configure on the waypoint with that annotation. John, don't know if you're still around. Am I missing something obvious as far as why that was set to no initially?
I didn't actually write any of this part, so I don't know any of the context. Okay. I think that we would probably want proxy config.
Okay, so I'll change this one to at least a question mark. And modify this. Okay, as far as traffic sidecar.istio, the name is unfortunate, but some of the actual functionality inside this annotation feels really useful. Excluding ports and IP ranges, interfaces. There's probably some subset that we are getting to exclude, but I can see this being useful for waypoint pods at least. Anybody have any opinions on any of these three so far?
I do wonder if some of them now belong in something that looks a bit more like gateway class for waypoint.
I don't disagree, because it's rare-ish that you would want. Oh, maybe. I'm trying to think of a scenario in which you would want different settings for particular waypoint instances, and maybe connect timeout if you've got services in a certain namespace that need more, that have higher latency, that need more time. If you want different path normalization settings, or keep alive settings. Keep alive feels like an interesting one that you'd want, maybe you want for a specific waypoint. So yes for some, but what I wouldn't want is to have multiple gateway classes for waypoints just for some of these configs. So I think that's where the annotation stay useful.
Well, I think the principle here should be, like, there has to be a positive argument made for why that feature should be supported in Ambient, right? Because we have the opportunity to deprecate something. And so if a feature exists because it was a transitional support thing from some older Istio version, we should try and ditch it. If the feature exists because we don't yet have something in the API, we should ditch it. So like some of the examples you're reading off on like traffic.sidecar, some of those seem like transitional things. like keep alive was there to prevent sidecars from keeping too many connections open to the upstreams. And that made sense in a situation where the number of client proxies outnumbered the number of upstreams, and so it was going to be a resource consumption problem for the client. But with waypoints, that's completely different, right? The topology dynamics are totally different. So why bother, right? You could see keep lives being important, maybe because you had the upstreams had to keep too many connections open and they were getting overwhelmed. But the number of waypoints is typically equal to or less than the number of upstreams for that connection. So again, not likely a problem. So it seems like they could be retired.
That's a really good context.
Other TOC folks, what do we like? In principle, I'd rather kill as many of these as possible. And so what we need, the process needs to be, there has to be a positive argument for a very specific setting. Proxy config, there's bound to be something in there that's a pain in the ass, but.
That makes sense to me. These annotations have been problematic when we were in sidecar mode alone. The complexity of applying them in an ambient world means that we should probably be carrying forward as few as possible.
Yeah, in general, I agree. Like even beyond the annotations, I'd rather have a small, stable set of things than the kitchen sink. We'll expand and violate that, I'm sure. We started off saying even maybe we only support gateway API, for example. But in general, I think it's a good principle because we can always add, but it's basically impossible to remove. This is probably our one real chance to do anything like this in the project for quite a while.
Yeah.
Will there be alternative ways to accomplish what these annotations accomplish today in an ambient world, or is this functionality that we're considering removing?
I think, depends on which one we're talking about. Some of them, yes, some of them, no. I also think I'm fine with removing functionality, actually. At least for now, we're only on beta as well.
We can always add back. We can always add back support for it if we think it's important.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of how we advise customers in terms of upgrading from their sidecar mesh to an ambient mesh.
That's where the pain's going to be. Yeah. Like I'm looking at like traffic sidecar, and I see things like, node selector. You only wanted certain things and like maybe a gateway on a certain nodes. How would you do that with waypoints if you want your waypoints to be on certain nodes, right?
Yeah, some of those things, like they're not even really, like we could configure them at the global level, but we can't configure them at a per pod basis anyways. So it's kind of tricky. Unless we say like if you enable the global ambient flag, you also change all this other global behavior. We could do, and maybe a bit surprising for some people though.
Yeah, like say for example, you said, I only want waypoints to run on ARM nodes because we have an ARM build of Envoy. Right, an annotation on a pod or a namespace is meaningless. An annotation on a node might make sense, but what you really want is a selector rule in something, right, in the deployment controller for waypoint, which is a totally different place where this would go.
Yeah, you can modify the template today. It's not easy, but it's doable.
Right.
Can I add a bit? So if I remember, many of these annotations were added as a workaround for issues. But what are the actual issues we have with waypoints right now? Do we know? Can we size them correctly? Can we deploy them correctly? Can we do lifecycle correctly for them? I think like that sort of a lot of these annotations might be needed if we cannot do any of those things right. But since we don't know yet, or maybe we do, maybe I'm just not aware of it, it might be premature to remove them. I would only remove them if things work correctly. If things don't work well, I would rather keep these annotations as workarounds.
Well,
So like
I'm trying to look.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Gabe. Yeah, go ahead, Gabe.
I was gonna say the previous arguments are persuasive to me in the sense that a lot of the functionality that these annotations and labels provided likely look different in a ambient gateway, more gateway API-ified world. And so maybe what the next step here is to do as a next step is to catalog what annotations and labels exist. And then kind of this goes a bit to Quat's point. What is this allowing us to do? And does it still make sense as a workload annotation or even a waypoint pod level annotation in an ambient world? And then if we still feel that we need that functionality, then we have to go build something to some API, some way of configuring that in an ambient world. So just to take Keep Alive, for example, let's say we had a compelling use case for Keep Alive. Maybe that is a gateway class or change something on the controller or what have you. Just what does everybody think about that?
Do we have to decide if it's a compelling use case right now? Can we just say you can do this without, you don't need to do this with this annotation in ambient anymore for sure, or somebody may need this. We don't care right now because this is alpha/beta. If you need this, raise a bug, right? And then we'll add it back, as Lewis was saying. So, like, I think, can we just do that? Do we have to actually decide that we need to add it and bring it in, or can we wait for people to yell when it's not there because we're not shipping a stable product yet, so we can have things that are not implemented, right? It's okay to do that.
Right. Plus, we can create a new namespace for the annotation, right? We don't actually have to inherit the existing names.
Yeah, exactly.
To bring over the existing functionality if it's needed.
So yeah, like if it's just a catalog, it can be like, we absolutely will never need this in ambient. We might need this if somebody wants it, they can raise a bug. But here, it's not just FYI, it's these things are not supported directly in ambient at this time when we ship whatever we're going to ship right now.
Right.
Yep, that's compelling to me. Add an action item. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so next item is Mitch.
Hey, yeah, this is just a public service announcement. We are going to be hosting an ambient end user feedback summit that we've been talking about some time. We've chosen Tuesday, August 15th from 9 to 11. That'll give us 2 hours. We are looking for 3 to 5 end users who have used ambient in a significant way, such as a staging environment. Obviously, we're not asking our users to put this into production yet. So we're not looking for production experience, but we're looking for something beyond book info. Like, I took my dev environment that contains a full copy of my service mesh and I deployed ambient on it. So I'm reaching out to users to sort of curate a list. If you have users in mind, if you would send them to me or give me some referral information, I'll work together with you. And then at this point, like, we're looking for users, and I don't expect to have too many, but running them through me keeps us from accidentally inviting, say, 9 or 12 users, which would sort of overwhelm the summit. If we do have too many users interested, we can always run a second summit at a later time to collect more and different feedback. Also, I'll be working on a list of questions for those users to sort of prompt their responses fairly open-ended because we want to collect a lot of feedback and spend most of our time with our users talking about their experience rather than us talking to them. Again, look forward to any help the community wants to provide on that.
So Mitch, the ask is for the community to get in contact with you and provide you with at least 2 users.
Yeah, I mean, I have some that I'm pursuing on my own, but if there are some users whose feedback you think would be particularly valuable, please do refer them to me. Reach out to me, let me know, and we'll coordinate.
You should ask steering to help you out with the 2 that you probably already have though.
Yeah, I can. Would I do that just on the steering questions Slack?
Yeah.
Okay, will do. That's all for me. Thank you.
Okay, that is all the topic on the agenda on the notes list. Does anyone else have any agenda?
No, I'm happy to go back through the annotations if you want to use the next 7 minutes. Seems like a good use of time.
All right. So I think we left it off here, right? Resource labels? Or do we
Well, actually, maybe we want to present the ones that are on the site.
There's a link, if you scroll up a little bit more, Francis, the resource annotations.
Oh, this guy.
Yep.
Yeah, that guy. All right, so we can skip. We don't care about the galley one. Could you make it a little bit wider, Francis? So you see a bit more of the description there.
Got
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
We obviously don't care about the injection templates, install operator stuff, any of the STO revision stuff.
So, quick question on the revision stuff. Maybe I dropped out of ambient work for a little while. Did we come to a conclusion on waypoint revisioning? Is it just going to be tied to the control plane?
It's the same as gateways, which is you label the gateway object and it will be controlled by that revision control plane.
Okay, so we need the STO revision label on the gateway, but not the workload.
That's correct.
Yeah. Users workload now, no one needs it.
Okay, got it. And that's probably a good clarification too, that all these annotations are specifically talking about targeting workloads, not necessarily waypoints. Those are 2 different sets of labels / annotations.
Yeah, this whole thing where it says the targets and it says pods or any or authorization policy, that probably needs to pass over to make it accurate for ambient.
Agreed. I'll take a note. Can we do something? Does it make sense to only support beta and above annotations? Does that get us anywhere? So does that help reduce the surface area that we need to consider?
Yes, although proxy is one of the bigger ones in beta. I think we're gonna.
Sure, we'll do more filtering, but like as an initial pass, right? We only will consider things in beta or above.
Well, there's only one that's beta.
Right, that's the other thing. I think we'll let's just talk about real world usage maybe instead of the alpha beta labeling, because we haven't spent as much time progressing these, but it certainly gives us a reasonable, standing with the user to say we're only going to progress some of them, and here's the ones that we decided to progress and why.
Yeah,
Like I
fair
wouldn't say that revision is alpha at this point, right? It's way more used than, say, I don't know, failure threshold on status sidecar. So maybe we should promote that one, in fact. The next interesting one here actually is export to under networking. I think that one is still valid, but I don't know if we have to support it out of the box.
I agree. I feel like export to is meant to, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the goal there would be to reduce the XDS config going to a particular proxy and like reduce the pain of that N squared problem. With Ambient, we don't really have that problem, at least not at the same scale. So I wonder if that's necessary in general.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So I would be inclined to not bring it forward and make people ask if there was a use case. Merge metrics. I don't even know what that would mean anymore. They'll implicitly be merged in a waypoint anyway.
Yep.
So I'm inclined to not bring that forward.
Yeah. As a rule, I wonder if all of the annotations that currently apply to workload pods almost automatically no longer apply in Ambient.
Yeah, I think that's probably mostly true. So, like, none of readiness would apply. Waypoint would probably have its own canned readiness mechanism anyway. The only interesting one is the proxy config stuff.
I would
That's
think
a
you
good
would
point.
have a gateway for waypoints, yeah.
Yeah, we certainly want to do it through Gateway. I'm trying to remember if there's any critical feature in there that would affect a large number of users. I think the answer is probably no as well, but there are probably some features in there that impact a small number of high-value users.
I think that's also correct.
It used to be people had to do, right, a lot of proxy config existed when the telemetry API didn't exist, right, to tweak logging, telemetry generation, telemetry pruning, stuff like that. A lot of that's now fixed with the telemetry API. There was also some stuff in there in the early days to deal with kind of certificate bootstrapping and trust bundle issues, right? If people were mounting trust bundles in weird locations.
Yep. There's a CA certificates PIM that will give you an extra root certificate for workload to workload. And I think for zero downtime root cert rotation, you need that, or the accompanying, it's also in the mesh config map. So you could use mesh config to take care of that as well, instead of an annotation.
Right. Right. At least the nice thing now with the waypoints is, you know, IstioD is effectively a controller for them and generate their deployments. So we can read it from the mesh config.
Yeah.
John, can you think of anything else? There used to be crap in there for, like, you know, where are the WASM things people were using? But I think that's mostly fixed nowadays too.
Yeah, it's pretty minimal. I think it's mostly really just bootstrapping the connection to IstioD. And I mean, the reason it's so low is really that it has one important field, which is arbitrary environment variables, and then we shove a bunch of stuff in there. So it's only so small because of that escape hatch, I think. But yeah, a lot of the stuff was kind of Envoy specific or telemetry related.
Okay, then yeah, I'm inclined to ditch it as well.
Hey, I need to run to another meeting. Can someone else take over the presentation?
I can represent, but
I think this one's over anyway, so we probably don't need to present.
oh yeah, we're
I
we're
just have
over
to go
time.
myself.
Yeah, we're at time.
Yeah.
But
I
I think
well.
we made a decision
Yeah,
too.
I think we've basically. I can't see anything else in the list when I look at it that we would want to keep.
Yeah, for annotations, I'll do a separate pass through of labels because there are some other ones for labels, but yeah, I'm inclined to agree.
Okay, so I think we're actually in good shape here then. Okay.
Thanks, all.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Steve.
Bye bye.